BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, time for the AMA. Welcome to the show. We often begin these things with a borrowed question, if you will, but I decided to move that to the end of the episode, so make sure to stay tuned for the entire duration so you don't miss that. And I would like to get right into some of the questions about the Zodiac Killer, questions and comments, that is, and let's start with the Zodiac Moonlight Murder connection, because the Texarkana Moonlight murders took place in 1946 with the Phantom Killer, the hooded perpetrator targeting lovers' lanes, and there are a lot of similarities between that set of murders in 46 and the Zodiac Killer murders in 68 and 69. The first one comes to us from Professor Stewart, who says, "I've always thought that the Zodiac must have followed the Moonlight murders case. It seems clear that the Zodiac was a fan of true crime and detective stories, and my gut reaction is that he must have modeled some of the Zodiac persona after various killers and masterminds from both fiction and reality." I think Professor Stewart is onto something with that, because the Phantom Killer is quite similar to the Zodiac, except the Zodiac was almost more about writing the letters and the ciphers. I've said it once and I'll say it again, I really do think that the Zodiac did indeed study the Moonlight murders, or had some familiarity of it, and even if it's not studying, would have had some real knowledge about it, like perhaps he could have rattled off the facts of the cases. But, I just think that there are so many similarities there that should not go ignored. The other case, of course, would be Jack the Ripper, and I even put forward the possibility that both the Phantom Killer and the Zodiac Killer may just have been really up to date with Jack the Ripper. They may have both been enthusiasts about Jack the Ripper, because I don't think that it's something that should be dispelled too easily. Our next comment coming to us from the Moonlight Murders is from Kelly Gable, who wants to point out some similarities in the names of the victims. First, there's Sherry Jo Bates, and really it's Sherry and Mary, because one of the Moonlight murder victims is named Mary Larey, Larey, but most notably, there's one named Betty Jo Booker. She was killed by the Phantom Killer in 1946. I think even once on this channel I accidentally referred to Betty Jo Booker as a Zodiac Killer victim, because I was thinking of Betty Lou Jensen, and then you can see Sherry Jo Bates, Betty Jo Booker, and then Betty Lou Jensen, very, very similar names. And what I think Kelly Gable is going down is that there is the possibility that the Zodiac may have had a lot more precision in his activities than people are originally expecting, because there may be an enormous amount of significance in the way victims were chosen. I mean, there could be details in a person's life. Most people simply think that if somebody is murdered by a serial killer, all right, well, either they had a relationship with the victim or they did not. Or it has to be something like Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer. Okay, well, he just broke into people's homes, right? And it's either that level of lacking intimacy, or they had to be a close personal friend or a relative, and nothing in between. But when you look at some of the similarities in the names, like Paul Lee Stein, Polly Ann Moore from the Moonlight Murders, and then Paul Stein is also similar to Paul Martin, and there's an investigator named Johnson, and that's similar to Kathleen Johns, Kathleen and Catherine. Catherine Starks was the a victim that was shot by the Phantom Killer, allegedly. That was the time when they did not get a good look at the perpetrator, Katie and Virgil Starks, but that's similar to Kathleen Johns. There's a big sense of similarity in the names, and I do think it's a very good observation. The only skeptical alternative I would provide to that is that when I was doing a series of uploads on this channel about the Sodder children, they were, well, it's a mystery from West Virginia, actually, about how a group of children may have died in a house fire, or maybe they survived and they were actually kidnapped by the Italian mafia, the Sodder children. And they received this postcard years later that says, "I love brother Frankie." And I really tried to track down that name, Frankie. And believe it or not, there were just countless names that were clouding the search engines named Frankie Joe. And that is actually for women, not a guy, but like women like, as you see, Sherry Joe Bates, Betty Joe Booker. And the more names I looked at, I really found that that was just such a common name for kids, particularly girls. Mary Jo, Betty Jo, Sherry Jo, very, very normal to have names like that in the 1960s and 70s. So that's just something I would like to share. But I think it's a good observation because last week on the AMA, I read off a something from Kelly Gable that was talking about how maybe the Zodiac was choosing victims and locations because of connections to the state of Indiana. Like everything actually had a much larger meaning than people were actually giving it credit for. And I do like that type of thinking, believe it or not. Now I'd like to go on to some of the comments about a recent episode, Zodiac Don Cheney, where we looked at the suspect Donald Lee Cheney, and you guys were responding to this one very positively. I'm really glad, and I just have to say thank you to everybody who has listened to that one and shared stuff in the comments section. So our first comment is going to come to us from Christ Hindu, once again on the episode Zodiac Don Cheney. "I'm convinced that Don Cheney was the Zodiac killer, and Arthur Lee Allen had some involvement, such as writing some of the letters. That can explain why the handwriting differs between the letters, or maybe he mailed the letters. The duo between Don Cheney and Arthur Lee Allen is the only thing that makes sense in the Zodiac mystery." Wow, what a bold statement from Christ Hindu. But that is one that needs a lot of consideration. Like, I mean, Drew Beeson asks this question all the time. Why does everybody keep coming back to Arthur Lee Allen? He was exonerated because of DNA, right? He was supposedly exonerated because of fingerprints and side palm prints on the letters. But why does everybody keep coming back to him? I mean, they definitely have other pieces of evidence against him, and even the fact that the Lake Herman Road murders on December 20th happened 2 days after Arthur Lee Allen's birthday on December 18th, meaning that all of the canonical crimes happened within 1 year of his life. I mean, Allen doesn't necessarily have to be the Zodiac killer, as Christ Hindu is written out here, even if he was just the errand boy, the person who drops the letters in the mailboxes, the person who is getting up on top of Mount Diablo and doing something like the scouting, trying to find locations or things that would go along with Don Cheney's radiant theory, if that is indeed what happened. And our next one comes to us from Jerry B., who says, "For the most part, the victims were looking up at the perpetrator, so that casts some doubt on the accuracy of the height description. Even in the case where the victims were standing for a short time at Lake Berryessa, they were in hill country and the ground was uneven." Wow, good observation. "Two people standing a few feet apart on uneven ground would also cast doubt on the height and accuracy of the perpetrator. Apart from this, it is known that the eyewitness descriptions are questionable at best. I'm sure it would be even more so with a gun in your face, not to mention a flashlight." Okay, I mean, yep, absolutely. I mean, eyewitness descriptions are not very reliable, right? And they can even test this stuff out. Or how about some of those tests where people are looking at photos of someone and they look like they're in their 30s, but they're actually in their 50s. Some people look extremely old and some people look extremely young. I mean, eyewitness descriptions aren't necessarily reliable. And also the future can impact the past. Like somebody will see something and they actually create these false memories. But in relation to height, I mean, Mike Mageau was sitting in the car at Blue Rock Springs on the 4th of July, and he was approached very closely. He was approached by the Zodiac. He was sitting very close to the Zodiac, but a flashlight's in his face. He didn't get a good look, and he's being sprayed with bullets a second later. I mean, going into his knee, going into his jaw. I really don't think that he has really a lot of any way he would be able to identify the perpetrator. Our next comment comes to us from Classic Chevy Cat Black, who says, "Okay, I have an AMA. Do your family and friends listen to your podcast, or are you doing this on the down low just to have something for yourself?" Hey, I mean, perfect AMA question, right? Uh, Friends, yes, they listen. Family, no. I mean, of course they know about it, but they don't listen. And I have the best girlfriend in the entire world. Hello, Noe, and she is involved with this to some extent. She definitely listens, but also she chooses a lot of the images, and I look to her for advice on many things as well. So I wouldn't say it's exactly meant to be on the down low, but it is. It was when I started. I wanted to do this 100% anonymously, and I put out like maybe 5 or 6 episodes, and nobody was listening. Like we're talking like one view on each of them because it was just the old-fashioned black box style, and it was the only person that was listening to them was me. I was that one view. And I was like, I either got to do something different, or I thought about it at the time actually that I was going to keep, putting out episodes talking about the CIA and conspiracy theories, but I wanted to use it as the source material for a novel that would have some title like The Voice of Cyberspace or something like that. I didn't settle on that title because I would definitely confer with people, and they would check out the show, and then I would see what sounds the best to you. I really do like getting second and third opinions about things like that, but I wanted to use it as a source material. I'm like, hey, if I'm going to make these recordings and no one's going to listen to them, I could at least write it into the story. And in 2017, people still listen to blogs. Or did I say that? People still read blogs. Now people mostly turn to things like listening to podcasts. I really find that I only read blogs when I really want some super precise information. But I thought of this idea about how I could put out these black box recordings that no one was going to listen to, and that you could have this novel called like The Voice of Cyberspace about a college student that gets obsessed with an online program that no one else will listen to. So I was tempted to do that, and I really had the idea. Then just one day I decided to stop putting things out about politics and true crime. And did I say that? Oh, I ruined it. No, I decided to stop putting things out about politics, and I started putting something out about true crime, talking about the murder of Missy Beavers, talking about the Zodiac killer, of course, the disappearance of Kyron Horman, as well as the disappearance of Andrew Gosden. I was much more involved with those cases back in 2017. By involved, I mean I simply would follow the videos online, and I would try to learn about them. And that's all I really did. I was just watching YouTube videos, and that still is the heart and soul of what Black Box Online Radio does, except on this channel, whether it's with the Zodiac Killer or the Things for the Anything Goes segment on Friday, I I really just try to watch documentaries, watch videos, listen to podcasts, read articles. But there's a lot more reading that goes into the show right now, especially with the Zodiac Killer, because listening to a podcast on the Zodiac Killer is going to be like, so many of them just have to be very general. And it's like, okay, there was this set of murders that happened in 1968 and 69. The Zodiac is quite different than other serial killers, and it's just so general that, I mean, it's a lot of repetitive information, and many people have written into this channel simply saying, hey, thank you for talking about the suspects. I don't mean just restating the facts that we can get anywhere on the internet, but actually trying to weigh the merit of the ideas. Is there, some likelihood that this person was the Zodiac killer, or is this person being set up by somebody? Is this person dealing with a narrative in which someone is trying to blame them for a series of murders that took place in the 1960s when they had nothing to do with it? And we try to really find out what was somebody else thinking. But in the past, I've definitely run my mouth way too much about things. Like I was saying that I know exactly what Lyndon Lafferty was thinking when he was writing his book. No, I don't. I mean, I'm not a mind reader. I'm not a psychic. So when we were talking about the murder of Joan Webster on this channel, first big thank you to Eve Carson for all the material she provided me with about the murder of her sister-in-law, Joan Webster, and there are a handful of episodes that are out now on the murder of Joan Webster from 1981. But when I was going through that, I was like, I was tempted to say, I think I know exactly what Gareth Penn was thinking when he tried to connect the murder of Joan Webster from Massachusetts to the Zodiac Killer, but I really had to hold back because I don't know what he was thinking. I was going to say something to the effect of, Gareth Penn had discoveries about mathematical signatures in the Zodiac Killer mystery. And the radiant theory, putting the radiant on top of Mount Diablo, finding out how it lines up to the crime scenes, Presidio Heights and Blue Rock Springs, as well as countless other things that he may have found that are all documented in his book Time 17. And I was like, I know exactly what he was thinking. He wanted to write a book about these mathematical signatures. So he needed a suspect because no one is just going to read the book about mathematical signatures in the Zodiac Killer mystery in 1987. Oh, they would read it now. Like Zodiac's Puzzle Solved or something like that. You could give it that type of title. Somebody would be up for listening to that. But in regards to the thought process of Gareth Penn, I was like, all right, he wanted to write this mathematical signature book. Then he found a suspect that was suitable for his agenda, Michael Henry O'Hare, who has a very strong Massachusetts connection. I mean, Harvard, MIT, and so on. So he connected Michael O'Hare to the murder of Joan Webster and to the Zodiac Killer murders that took place in the state of California. And the Massachusetts connection was twofold. Number one, it allowed him to expand the dynamics of his suspect. He had a more dynamic suspect, but also it was a way to stand out from the crowd talking about the Massachusetts connection. And I've said very clearly before that the Massachusetts connection could be a suitable title for Time 17, Zodiac Killer, the Massachusetts connection. But is that actually what Gareth Penn was thinking when he was writing the book? I have no idea. I mean, it's possible, but I don't know what he was thinking when he chose Michael O'Hare as the Zodiac Killer suspect and tried to connect him to the murder of Joan Webster. I think about these things, and I think everybody does. I think everybody has these moments from time to time when they're like, I wonder what this person is up to. Or this figure seems really suspicious, and you want to find out what is the motivation behind that suspicious feeling that you have. Like, why are you getting it in the first place? What is this person up to? Because with so many writers, especially true crime writers, you can almost feel like they have an agenda that is multifaceted, that is like two-part. One of them is they definitely do want to sell their books for profit. Okay, I mean, lots of true crime writers out there want to do that. Have you heard of Robert Graysmith? I mean, yes, he wanted to do things like that, but then that's not a very satisfying answer that somebody like Robert Graysmith simply wrote a book in 1986, or published a book in 1986. He started it in 1972, about the Zodiac Killer, and he's has all of these sentences in there that are half true and half false, getting fluffy on the details, turning the detectives into stars and showboating them. All of these things, there's loads of sensationalism in the writings of Robert Graysmith, and you want to know, what is his agenda? Like, what is he really doing? How does he operate as a writer? And I definitely get curious about things like that, but can I read somebody's mind? Absolutely not. Our next comment is from Manic Eptipode. That's what it says. The first time I read that, I thought it was Manic Episode, but it's Manic Eptipode. Thanks for a great episode, Ned. No doubt Don Chaney is the best suspect. I'm tempted to think the Zodiac isn't anyone we know of, but if he was any one of the known suspects, no doubt he was Don Chaney. For future episodes, what about revisiting some classics we haven't heard about in a while, such as Rick Marshall or Lawrence Kane? Excellent idea, Manic Eptipode. But those will be for some future episodes. And also I said that I wanted to continue on with those suspect AMAs, like when we did Zodiac Ross Sullivan AMA, Zodiac Kwiatkowski AMA, and Don Chaney was the most recent one. If there are any other suspects that you would like to hear about in those discussions, you can put your idea in the comment section below. You can always hit the like button and subscribe, but please put the suspect or group or some theory that you have that you would like to hear about in those extended AMAs, especially the ones that we have already talked about, that there already is an episode about on this channel, because then we can read off the questions and comments and go through them. And when I say we, I mean I can't do it without you guys. You guys do the hard work for this AMA. You write the comments, and then I just respond to them. But someone here says, I thought Alan was kicked out of the Navy. Like me, LOL. This is James Whoever, by the way. I thought Alan was kicked out of the Navy. I think that's true. Arthur Lee Allen kicked out of the Navy, but Michael Cole did write in his book, Zodiac Revisited, Volume 3, that he thought the Zodiac Killer was either ex-military, specifically, it's a hard word to say sometimes, specifically ex-Air Force or ex-Navy. Don Chaney is ex-Air Force, Arthur Lee Allen, ex-Navy. Arthur Lee Allen is a rather fascinating figure, fascinating in like a very disgusting way. Like the way that piece of modern art, the urinal that's turned upside down, can be fascinating. That's what Arthur Lee Allen is, because he was a terrible, terrible person. Child molester, a habitual liar. I mean, perhaps even a pure psychopath. I mean, we don't necessarily know 100%. But in regards to this, he does have a lot of the abilities that the Zodiac Killer would require. So even Alan had a strong understanding of chemistry, so he has this scientific connection, which is, I mean, the Zodiac Killer was no dummy, definitely not someone who was uneducated, definitely not someone who was just picking up a few books here and there. Alan also seemed to have somewhat of a high IQ. He had the connection to Travis Air Force Base, which I believe he did some work at, that Graysmith wrote about in Zodiac Unmasked. But I think that Alan, firstly, has been exonerated by DNA for all intents and purposes, and Arthur Lee Allen may not have been at it alone, because in the most recent Zodiac episode, we were talking about Donald Lee Chaney, the person who brought him forward as a suspect, as well as provided Robert Graysmith with all of this damning evidence about how Arthur Lee Allen may have been the Zodiac Killer. Don Chaney was just running his mouth, flapping his gums like you would not believe. Drew Beeson did ask me to share something in response to the AMA that I did on Don Chaney, mostly talking about Drew Beeson's book, citing it on the Zodiac Killer and the material that Drew puts out on the Zodcast. Drew is perhaps the largest proponent of the Don Chaney theory, and that is that there's this connection that Don Chaney has to the San Francisco Chronicle reporter Paul Avery. Avery would go on to practically be the Zodiac Killer's publicist, and it goes back to Bakersfield Junior College in the 1950s. But with Don Chaney, he would have been a classmate of Paul Avery's, and they put on a production of The Mikado when Don Chaney was at Bakersfield Junior College. And all of this comes together about the references in the Zodiac letters to the Mikados, as well as the entire concept of what that is. There's a Lord High Executioner who wears a black hood, right? He's like Lake Berryessa. And if you watch the Mikado, it's all about how people are punished for flirting. You can be sentenced to death for flirting. Think about that in relation to targeting lovers' lanes. I do have to agree with the skeptics that the person isn't saying, I'm the Lord High Executioner when I'm committing the crimes. Even if Mike Michaud didn't get a good look at the Zodiac's face at Blue Rock Springs, he certainly isn't saying something like, I'm the Lord High Executioner and I'm going to punish you for flirting. So, I mean, that didn't seem to have happened at Blue Rock Springs, especially not at Lake Berryessa, with both Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard surviving the Lake Berryessa stabbing. Cecilia passed away 2 days later in the hospital, and that really goes to show that they didn't report anything like that. The person isn't saying there's an outright direct Mikado reference. That was attributed later on via things like the letters, but the influence of the Mikado is still there all the same. Okay, so that's one, the most dangerous game. Although Ray Grant did bring up the point that the most dangerous game references might actually come from other pieces of literature. Our next comment comes to us from William Kane on the episode The CIA's Greatest Hits. That was a book that was actually shared with me by Playtime. Thank you, Playtime, again for that book. There's an episode about the CIA here on this channel. And William Kane says, very impressive. I'm pleasantly surprised by your willingness to accept the views in this book. It's truth, folks. Wake up before it's too late. Yeah, the CIA does some terrible things. One of my family members once asked me, would you ever like to work for the CIA? And my simple response to that was, no. They kill people. And I mean, that definitely happens. I'm sure not everybody who's working for the CIA is experiencing something like that, but they do some very destructive things. I mean, especially going through all the things in that book, The CIA's Greatest Hits by Mark Zeppesour, talking about destabilizing foreign governments, human mind control experiments, not to mention just doing things to people to see how humans can resist the different levels of psychological abuse and such. The CIA does a lot of nasty things. And one more from that episode is from Eve Carson, the author of the book Mommy's a Mole, which talks about the connections between the family, the Websters, and the CIA. Eve Carson, the sister-in-law of Joan Webster, who provided me with all that material for the Joan Webster episodes. Eve Carson says, President Clinton's apology for experimentation on human subjects. Radiation was not the only method used, under the CIA's mind control umbrella. And you can search for Bill Clinton apologizes for MK Ultra human experimentation on YouTube. Oh, yeah, I did watch that based on Eve's recommendation. It's terrible. Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, just gets up there and starts laughing about it more. Sorry, folks. And I mean, that's paraphrasing, but I think you can get the idea. I was not impressed with that at all. But that is definitely more about the radiation experiments that the CIA was doing. Okay, so thank you for listening to this segment here. Everybody, please stay tuned, and I will be right back with a segment about the serial killer Wayne Williams right after this. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to talk about some of the ways in which you can help Black Box Online Radio. This channel relies on your support, and the best way you can help out is just by listening to some more content. If you like what you hear, you can hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends on social media. But I should also say that Black Box Online Radio now has a Teespring page, and there will be some links in the description box. Please feel free to check out some of the merchandise that is available. Almost all sizes and colors are listed. So, you can also help out by going over to the Zodiac Killer channel and watching the documentary series Obsession into Darkness, parts 1, 2, and 3. I was one of the contributors for that, and you can see some other great Zodiac content on the Zodiac Killer channel. And yes, there will be a part 4 of Obsession into Darkness at some point in the future. And for now, let's get back to the show. Okay, hello, and we are back. Continuing onward with the discussions in the AMA, I received this question from an informant known simply as Goldcatcher on Instagram. This was in the DMs on Instagram, and Goldcatcher asked me the question, what do you think about Wayne Williams and the Atlanta child murders? And to be honest with you, of course I've heard of Wayne Williams. He's a very famous serial killer in American history, but I really was not up to date on a lot of the details of the case. Over the last weekend, I watched 3 different documentaries on the Atlanta child murders. 2 of them were rather short, so it was it wasn't too time-consuming, and I'm coming at this from the standpoint of someone who is not an expert, but instead I would simply say that one film that I was watching was definitely putting forward the pathway that Wayne Williams was responsible for an enormous amount of deaths of children from 1979 to 1981 in Atlanta, perhaps more than 28 victims. He was only ever convicted on 2 murders, but what happened is more than 20 victims were attributed to the serial killer Wayne Williams in Atlanta. One documentary put forward the case that he was extremely guilty of all this. Another one was putting forward the case that he was being framed, that he didn't actually do this, and that some of the victims were murdered by the Ku Klux Klan in Atlanta, and then they were attributed onto Wayne Williams as a serial killer. In short, he was the fall guy. There's a police cover-up. The police are in cahoots with the Klan. And the third one was a little bit more objective. So my response to this, as someone who has just had a very, very loose and general understanding, 1979 to 1981, murdering 28 people, even murdering 20 people in that short 2-year time frame, that does not appear to be something that is typical among serial killers. And I hope no one will read into that statement any more than just that right there. That is not typical among serial killers to murder that many victims. Most serial killers actually start out in somewhat of a very gradual and slow way, or there can be things like the Zodiac killer with odd time gaps. The Unabomber Ted Kaczynski also had rather long time gaps in between his activities during his reign of terror. But in regards to Wayne Williams as a serial killer, I did watch the interview with one of the surviving victims, who definitely says, Wayne Williams attacked me, he tried to murder me in Atlanta, and I got away. It seems like he was up to no good. I mean, or there is evidence in favor of his guilt. I would lean toward the possibility that Wayne Williams murdered some people. Maybe he didn't commit all of these child murders, and there is indeed a police cover-up. And that really goes to just something that I think is important to talk about, and that is the notion of police cover-ups and blaming serial killers as well, because Goldcatcher was the one who asked me to look into this, and it's quite similar to the stuff that we've been going through in the murder of Joan Webster, because the alternative theory to the Zodiac killer having murdered Joan Webster is that Joan Webster was a student in Massachusetts who was murdered, and a police cover-up took place to hide the identity of the person who killed Joan. And there are a couple reasons for this. Eve Carson, author of the book Mommy's a Mole, says she has documentation that shows that the two detectives in the case, Andrew Palumbo and Carmen Tamaro, had knowledge of the correct manner of Joan Webster's death 7 years before her body was discovered. Joan disappeared in 1981 and her remains were discovered in 1990. And quite similarly to what we were just saying about how there could be a police cover-up in Atlanta, there could have been a police cover-up in Massachusetts going on where what they did was they tried to attribute this murder to a serial killer named Leonard Paradiso, who is the subject of the book The Paradiso Files by the prosecutor Tim Burke. He is the author of that. So blaming a serial killer for the misdeeds of someone who could have had a connection to law enforcement, or even just somebody who had a connection to a powerful individual, because from the title of Mommy's a Mole, you can see that it's going to lead into the CIA covering up for someone who was very powerful. This will even go to one of my suspicions back in 1969, involving someone we've talked about recently on the channel named Kenneth Harrison. This was a requested upload from Kelly Gable to look into the serial killer Kenneth Harrison, who was known as the Giggler, or the Boston Giggler, and I mentioned him on one of these AMAs, and I knew that it had to turn into its own standalone episode, because I was suspicious that this guy even murdered anybody, for the following reason, that there were just so many inconsistencies in the way that the victims were chosen. Kenneth Harrison operated over a period of 2 years in the late 1960s in Boston, Massachusetts, hence the name the Boston Giggler. He gets that name because it was attributed to him by himself. He made a phone call after the murder of one of his victims, whose name was Joe Breen, and that he said there's a body down in the water, and they asked him who is calling, and he said, the Giggler. And he busted out into maniacal laughter. And the reason why I was suspicious of the activities of Kenneth Harrison is that his first victim was named Lucy Palmerine, and Lucy Palmerine was a 6-year-old girl whom Kenneth Harrison gave a ride to in a taxi, and then he convinced her to get out of the taxi and get on his back, like giving her a piggyback ride. And the story is that he was just so overwhelmed with a murderous impulse that he threw her into the water, like threw her into the river, and she couldn't swim, and she passed away. Another one of his victims, named Clover Parker, was a 70-year-old woman, in her 70s, I should say, and he's helping her walk across a bridge. Once again, that murderous impulse just overtook him, and he threw her across the guard railing, over the guard railing, into the water, and she died. He had this method of throwing his victims into the water, and you heard that little reenactment there from the murder of Joe Breen, where he was drinking with a guy at a bar, and they got into a dispute over who was going to pay for a bottle of whiskey. Then that escalated into an argument, and Kenneth Harrison allegedly murdered Joe Breen by striking him in the head with a rock, blunt force trauma. Then he threw the body into the water. It's like his signature, it's his pattern. The crime that I'm still not certain that Kenneth Harrison actually committed, the Boston Giggler, is the final victim, the murder of a boy named Kenneth. His name is Kenneth Martin. And Kenneth Martin wasn't struck in the head, he wasn't thrown into the water, he was choked to death with a piece of twine, strangled with a piece of twine, and his body was thrown into a railway tunnel and then hidden under a piece of tarp, more or less, like a canvas-style tarp, and then that's it. It's like then somebody even provides an anonymous tip connecting Kenneth Harrison to this crime. So I mean, to this day, it's possible that there could be that same method going on. Somebody is blaming a serial killer for additional crimes, and that crimes that they did not commit. I mean, did Kenneth Harrison actually murder Kenneth Martin? Possibly. I definitely do not know the truth. But I am definitely also saying that that doesn't fit the pattern, that doesn't fit the MO, that doesn't have any of the hallmarks that the Boston Giggler had with his other victims. So, I think that this is something that we need to be very, very much aware of about how these crimes are taking place and how serial killers are operating, as well as the possibility of law enforcement or even a more powerful agency such as the CIA blaming a serial killer for crimes that have been committed by somebody else. Okay, everybody, please stay tuned. Be right back after this quick message. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to remind everybody about YouTube Premium. If you use the YouTube Premium features, you can download Black Box Online Radio, take it on the go, out walking, in the car, anywhere and anyhow. YouTube Premium also gives you access to special YouTube original shows and YouTube music. And now, let's get back to the episode. Okay, hello, and we are back. Our next comment comes to us from Midnight Story Productions, who says, Ned, do you ever plan on doing a recording on the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders? Brutally sad case. And I responded by saying, hi, thanks for the suggestion. I'm not familiar with this one. I'll have to learn more, and then let's see. And to tell the truth, I had never heard of this case until Midnight Story Productions had written that in there. But then, continuing by saying, oh man, you are going to get into this. This is Oklahoma's most notoriously unsolved crime ever. Thank you. Can't wait to hear your assessment. And I'm still going through the learning process with this. And you can hear from some of the info in the title. There's this crime spree that happens in Oklahoma involving Girl Scouts. And all I can say now is, after going through a couple YouTube videos about this, perhaps this will be a good subject for the Anything Goes segment on Friday, but I wanted to address it now that it really is quite notable how theories in the true crime world form, where someone can be like, hey, maybe somebody's murdering these Girl Scouts in Oklahoma. Wait a second. Maybe it's two perpetrators. And then it expands into a group murder theory. Those are the videos that I've been going through, and I checked out the channel again, Bella Fiore. I don't really watch too many of her videos. I've noticed that she is absolutely exploded in terms of popularity. I had seen one or two of her videos when she was getting like 200,000 views. Now she has over 1 million. But the better one was from Caitlin Rose, whom I thought really compacted a lot of information, as well as sharing her own theories about that. The Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. Perhaps for the Anything Goes segment on Fridays, I will continue with that one, but I just wanted to throw out a few notes on that. And the next one that I would like to talk about is, a lot of people have been tuning in recently to the episode The Suicide of Jason Moss, which is about the movie Dear Mr. Gacy and the book The Last Victim. Jason Moss was somebody who contacted John Wayne Gacy in prison, and he began a correspondence with him. He wrote a book about it called The Last Victim because Jason Moss felt that he was very traumatized by the events of interacting with John Wayne Gacy. and then he went on to commit suicide himself. Some of the things that they left out in the movie version of this, they made it into a movie called Dear Mr. Gacy, but some of the things they left out is that he really corresponded with a lot more famous people, like, famous in a bad way, that is, Richard Ramirez, Charles Manson, just to name a couple. And when I did this one, I often have to respond to a lot of questions because I think some things got a little bit misinterpreted. For starters, one person said, "Why the hate for the Night Stalker?" And I talked about that in an AMA, that I don't hate Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. I simply think he was a terrible person. I mean, I don't hate anyone in the metaphysical sense. Absolutely, I dislike the guy. Absolutely, I think everything that he did was wrong. And then someone has responded here on that episode, The Suicide of Jason Moss, saying, "Ramirez is slime, but Gacy and other serial killers aren't. You're twisted." And it's roughly a same categorization of that, except coming at it from the different way. Absolutely, John Wayne Gacy was slime. Absolutely, Charles Manson was slime. Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, the other people we were just talking about, Wayne Williams, Kenneth Harrison, they're terrible, terrible people. When we learn about serial killers, there are so many reasons, not just one, but there's so many reasons about why people get pulled into this type of thinking. Some people think that it'll helps them recognize warning signs of narcissistic personalities, or they can recognize sociopathy. Like if somebody is maybe not a clinical sociopath, but they have sociopathic tendencies, they're doing this so they can learn more about humanity in a way in which it makes them feel safe. Their education about these very traumatic and dark sides of humanity is somewhat educational, and it's also comforting to know that, okay, this is what a bad person is like. I need to avoid people who have these dark tendencies. But there are definitely other reasons why people get pulled into serial killer literature or watching serial killer documentaries. If you're listening to this channel, you've probably had some phase in your life when you were just hooked on serial killer documentaries. YouTube has no shortage of them. But one point about it is something that I heard on the show 90210, not like Beverly Hills 90210, the original one, the reboot that they did in the early part of the new millennium. And it was how one of the characters says that she loves horror films because it scares her. And that type of fear, it provides a stimulating escape from reality temporarily. And I think that a lot of people definitely are attracted to serial killers and the podcasts, the documentaries, or somebody like Jason Moss would actually go a step further and want to write and correspond with a serial killer to understand how he thinks, or even she thinks, in the cases of some people like Eileen Wuornos or Kathy Wood, Gwendolyn Graham, women too. But in regards to this comment here, absolutely, they are slime. They are bad people. And we want to learn, why do these bad things function? That's really the thing that I like to focus in on. Why do these things happen? How does somebody grow up to become a serial killer? Someone who commits murders either because of impulses, urges, or the recreational element. And I think that it's a mystery even to this day. We definitely can tell you how the brain is functioning. We can tell you how genetic components would drive somebody to kill. But even a simpler explanation for that is child abuse. And somebody has projected this type of abuse onto a child. Or it can be also neglect, just the lack of love, lack of bonding with parents. And then they go through life learning how to manipulate. Because I often cite this interview with a quote-unquote clinical sociopath when he's talking about how his sociopathic tendencies really began to form when he noticed that people were getting excited about things, like they're jumping up and down and celebrating, and the excitement that they were expressing doesn't change the physical events. Like, just because you jump up and down and celebrate, that doesn't change the fact that you won a prize or you got a good grade on your test. The excitement they're expressing does not change what is happening. So that is kind of a differentiation. And once he was able to differentiate between those two things, then he realized that by controlling people's excitement, he could gain that manipulative ability over them. He could gain control of the situation, and then as soon as he was around someone, he began to manipulate them because they are experiencing those fluctuating emotions, and in all reality, he is not. So you want to find out stuff like that. Why is somebody experiencing that, and how do people get into those types of habits? And child abuse definitely seems to be the largest largest factor that is driving people to become serial killers. This episode was about John Wayne Gacy. Once again, the suicide of Jason Moss, Dear Mr. Gacy, and The Last Victim. And John Wayne Gacy was perhaps expressing a lot of animosity toward his father. He was beaten severely by his father. Gacy was also a bisexual and targeted men, young men to be precise, so he was perhaps very ashamed of his homosexuality. And if I can share something on a personal note, there's another reason why I greatly appreciate everybody tuning in to listen to the episode, The Suicide of Jason Moss. I perhaps have 6 episodes on this channel about John Wayne Gacy, and I always noticed that I was really trying to find one that people would actually really take somewhat of an interest in, because I was putting them out and I noticed, 1 or 2 people share some things and 1 or 2 people leave some comments, but it just wasn't seeming to catch on the same way that the Zodiac Killer or some of these other unsolved mysteries have. And this one here was the first time that I think a larger amount of people actually tuned into about John Wayne Gacy, and then they can just tell me that I'm a twisted guy for liking certain serial killers. I don't like any of the serial killers. I want to learn more from them. And there is definitely a chaotic element that goes on in life. There's a chaotic element that happens when people want to do things like Jason Moss corresponding with a serial killer. There's a chaotic element when you want to watch a documentary about a serial killer. But that doesn't mean that you have to bring the evil into yourself. You probably are going to maybe not make the best decisions and such. Oh, and here's a big one. Absolutely do not talk about this stuff to people who are not super familiar with true crime. Like at a party or something, you start talking about serial killers. That doesn't go over too well, because I said I would conclude with a borrowed question. And come to think of it, I don't even remember where I heard this from, but the question was, should you talk to people about conspiracy theories if they are not familiar with them? Meaning, like, you just throw somebody in the deep end and then you want to talk about the New World Order and the deep state and the shadow government, about how all politicians are in the pockets of the mega banks and so on, or the covert actions of the CIA, or perhaps how serial killers can be groomed and created by the CIA or the OSS or these mind control experiments. I think the answer to that question is an absolute no. I've been at social gatherings when I start talking about serial killers, CIA, or even the darker side of politics, about things as simple as corruption. And I think that people need some warming up to that. I mean, firstly, freedom of speech, right? You can say anything you want. I mean, it's just a suggestion. But if you want, I mean, I definitely did it many times where I started running my mouth about things. And the whole point about talking about serial killers at like some social gathering is it bothers people. It makes them uncomfortable, and they don't comprehend the message that you're trying to say. When you want to talk about the psychological elements that would drive somebody to become a serial killer, they're just going to be like, what? You're being weird. Or if you want to talk about conspiracy theories, be like, what? That's not true. Go back to InfoWars, loser. Like, people are going to have that type of reaction. So there are ways to share the idea about this using that specific sensitivity that, I mean, communicating the message in a way in which the receiver can understand. That's just my 2 cents on the subject. If anybody has anything they would like to say about conspiracy theories, true crime, serial killers, put all that stuff in the comments section below. I'd love to hear your responses to that, and I will look forward to the Anything Goes segment on Fridays. I'll see you guys there. You can follow the show on Facebook as well as Instagram, BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram, as well as visiting the Teespring page. Lots of links in the description box here. And as always, you can like and subscribe if you like what you hear. That's all for me now. See you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.